Everyone, and welcome to this introduction to the newer version of Hold'em Trainer. So, what is Hold'em Trainer? Hold'em Trainer is a software for poker players, and specifically Texas Hold'em poker players. And it is a software that is meant to help you train yourself uh, in ways of strategy. So, if you like to think about strategy and if you want to get better at the game, then there's a lot of things that we can learn, especially about what to do with each hand. And so that's often represented with ranges in poker circles. And Hold'em Trainer, is basically a software that allows you to manage, think about your strategies, record them, and then train them on the software. So, for example, I'll go into this later, but this would be a strategy in a certain scenario in the game. And then Hold'em Trainer provides you with this kind of simulator where you can practice your strategy. So what's the purpose for this? The reason that this is a useful thing is because there's a lot of situations in poker that don't come up very often, especially if you play live. For example, let's say you raise pre-flop and then somebody raises you again, and you're not quite sure what to do with each hand actually, and you kind of feel uncomfortable and you kind of want to know more about this spot, but you don't play it very often, and so you don't have a good intuition on what to do. So Hold'em Trainer will allow you to just drill that spot constantly and play thousands and thousands of hands, however many you want, and just get a feel for what you should do in that kind of spot with different cards. So as we can see here, it's really a two-step process. The first step is to define your own strategy. So we have an example range here. I'll explain more how ranges work on Hold'em Trainer later. But basically, it's every card you can possibly have, every combination of cards represented in this grid. And then this is the situation where you're the dealer button and you're facing a raise by the very first player in the game, so under the gun player. And he raises and you decide, what should I do? And this range basically represents, with each card combination that you could possibly have, so ace, king, aces, queens, whatever, what you think you should do in that position. So this could come from a solver, like something that solves the game for you, or something that you just want to, that you just feel is right, or you want to use in a certain position. And so you can build this range. And for example, here we have 3 different types of actions. So the first one is the type of cards that want to raise all the time. So for example, here we can see we have aces, ace, king, ace, queen. They pretty much raise all the time, raise again. And then we also have some of the higher pairs like kings and queens. And these cards that are shown here, they want to raise all the time. And then we have cards that certainly want to fold all the time, which is actually most cards in this case. And then maybe some of the cards we only want to raise some of the time. And we'll get more into how we think about this later. But the point is that you can define that, and then later on you can train it on Hold'em Trainer. So for example, here ace king, we said, so we see that small blinds and big blinds have been bet, then the first player has raised, 2 folds, and now it's on us with ace king. And as we've seen above, in this case we kind of want to raise, so we can try that and it works and it's correct, and it's just a coincidence that we got the same hand, and you get a new hand. So 8-4, probably want to fold that, and then jack 5, probably want to fold that, 5-2 folds, 7-3 folds. It's a lot of folds in this particular scenario. But for example, we can also choose another scenario here in the demo. Let's say we've raised pre-flop and then someone in the big blind has re-raised us. So we don't have all the different combos anymore. But now we want to have some different actions. Sometimes we want to fold, sometimes we want to call, sometimes we want to raise. And so you see this different scenario, and you can also practice that. And yeah, so you might have realized that it looks a little bit different than most of the ranges you see online represented. And that's because it's also really useful for post-flop ranges, not just pre-flop ranges. So maybe let's just get into the software right now. So if you click on My Ranges and you already have an account, you get to this page. And this page is really one of the main pages. This is your manager. So here you can see I have a bunch of folders on the left. So these are open ranges. So these are the ranges for when all the other players have folded pre-flop and it just comes to you. What do you want to do? And then we have versus open ranges. So somebody already raised once and it comes to you. What do you want to do against that? Then we have small blind ranges, some big blind ranges. What happens when you've been raised, when you're not in the blinds. When you've been raised from someone who's like not in the blinds, and when you've been raised by the blinds, what do you want to do? So these are all pre-flop things. And Hold'em Trainer actually also allows you to do post-flop ranges, and we can get into that a little bit, but I will make new videos introducing some of those. So how do these ranges work? So let's start with a simple opening range. Like, let's say everybody folds. So we have 3 folds, for example, here in this range. And you're on the button and you decide what to do. I should say this is for 6 max games only for now. So these are like cash games with 6 players. So let's press on the edit button for now and see how the editor works. So this is the Hold'em Trainer editor. And here may be a good time to talk about how these ranges differ from maybe the more familiar ranges that you've seen. So more familiar ranges usually are like divided into suited hands and offsuit hands and pairs. And you don't have that many squares. And it's maybe a little bit easier to tell what's going on. But the downside of those is you don't have information about the suits. And in Hold'em Trainer, you have all the possible combos that exist right in one view. So we have a grid here. You can see this is ace, king, queen, jack, and so on. And also on the side. And then you actually have, if we zoom in a little bit, you have subdivision. So each smaller cell contains 16 individual squares. And those are all the suit combinations. So you can have ace of spades, king of spades, for example, would be this spot here. And then ace of spades, king of hearts is here, and so on. It's a grid, right? And we can, for example, see that some of the suited hands are always along the diagonal. So in this pre-flop range, suitedness plays a role, of course. And so we see that some of these weaker suited hands also get raised. So let's see how the editor works. We have here the stacks. So these are just the stacks that players have in big blinds at the start of the hand. And then we cannot edit these right now because we have some history already happening. So the history is basically all the actions that happen to get to this spot that you want to analyze. So here we have the small and big blinds bet, and we have under the gun folded, the first player folded, right? Hijack, the second player also folded, and then a cutoff folded. And the button, this is you, it's now your turn, and you want to decide what to do. And later you can press these buttons if you want to get to a different scenario, right? I'll show you that. But for now, let's stick to this scenario. And here on the side, we see the brush. So the brush basically contains all the options that you want to be able to do in this spot. So we have fold, of course, and we actually don't want to call ever in this scenario. Like, that would be considered a limp, and it's usually not a good idea in that spot. But if you want to, you can actually enable this option also here by clicking on a check mark, and you can also include a call. And then you have the raise size 2.25 big blinds, for example, here, which is a half pot raise. But you can also add more raise sizes. For example, I could raise to 4 or 7, and they will have different colors, right? And then what you can do, so these are all the options that will be available. And what we have here is the different frequencies that you want to apply for this brush. You can also see it here on the slider. So right now it's 50-50, but if I slide it differently, you have something like, you can adjust it more carefully here. So like 80% fold, 20% raise. So if you have some cards where you want to raise some of the time, but not all of the time, you can adjust the slider here, and then you have a different brush. So for example, if I want to take some of these hands that I'm folding right now, actually want to raise them sometime, I can select them and then apply this brush, and we have these cards having this 80-20 distribution here on the side. We see that. So let's actually take that back. And right, I will explain how that works during training later on when you have these mixed decisions. So here on the side we have some categories. Pre-flop, this is actually not so helpful. So let's maybe create a new range and show some post-flop spots. So if I go to my manager, I think maybe I even have some, yes. So this is a folder I created recently. It's not really any correct range or anything, just for demonstration purposes. So here we have a different spot. And it's again, everyone has 100 big blinds at the start. Then we have the blinds, and under the gun raised 2.25 big blinds. Everyone folded, and the big blind called. So then we get to the flop right. And in Hold'em Trainer, you can actually choose the flop that you want. So we set king of spades, jack of spades, nine of hearts, and then a check by the big blind. So first thing we can see is that we have the dead cards that are on the flop, basically. They're blacked out here. So these are not possible to have in your hand anymore, right? That makes sense. So those would be the king of spades, jack of spades, and nine of hearts. And another thing we can see is that we have a link here. So as you can see, most of the combos are actually blacked out. That's because we wouldn't get to this position with all different cards. Before we looked at the opening range, and that's exactly the range that is basically the predecessor to this one, because we had to open raise first to get to this point. And if we look at that range one more time, that was this range, and that's exactly the range we get to this point with, right? And we can actually choose that here. If we don't choose a link, we see we have all the cards again. But if we do choose a link, then we only have some of the cards. Now I should explain, in this matrix, the top right cells are showing what we actually want to do with each combo. But each combo also appears in the bottom left, like for example, queen of spades, and then let's say queen of hearts is here, but it's also here, right? And this combo here will also be here. And so the gray coloration shows how often, relative to other combos, we have this combo at this point, based on our previous ranges. Right, so you can link up your ranges in this fashion. Next, here we choose either a check or a 2 big blind bet. And let's see, we have some different brushes here that we used. And we have actually, here in this little icon, you can see these are 100% folds, 80% fold, 20% bet, 65, 50-50, and so on, right? And so let's have a look at the categories, which is what I wanted to highlight before. So these are the different, Hold'em Trainer basically just computes some categories for you already that you can work with for easier range building. For example, it computes which combos give you a straight, trips, 2 pair, 1 pair, high card, and you can also go into details here. So in the 1 pairs we have aces, then all the king pairs, queens, the jack pairs, tens, nines, eights through deuces. And in the high cards we have aces, queens, tens, and lower cards. And you can also see how much of your total range is made up from these cards. And another thing, we have our draws. So we have all the flush draws here, and you can see now it becomes really useful that we have all the suit information in our ranges. So you can see always the top left corner of each grid cell is 2 spades. And since we already have 2 spades on a flop, those would be flush draws. And we have backdoor flush draws whenever we have at least 1 spade in our hand, or 2 hearts, because there's a 9 of hearts. So backdoor flush draw means 3 of 1 suit in total, so that we could potentially still hit a flush. And then we have no flush draws and open-ended straight draws. So these are straight draws, also double gutters with which have basically 2 cards that can make a straight, like 2 different values. And gut shots means you need 1 exact value to make a straight, and then no straight draws, right? And so what are these categories used for? So basically, it's used for selection. So on Hold'em Trainer, it's actually not so easy anymore as before to select the exact combos you want, because we have so much control now. We can really select each different combo to apply a brush to. So I can manually just click on them, and by clicking on them, I can toggle them in and out. But that's a little bit difficult. So maybe let me show you some hotkeys. They're also available by pressing on this icon for Mac and Windows. So what we can do is we can press Command or Control to select all cells that have, like, regardless of the suit, that have the same value. So if I press anywhere in the larger grids, I can select like that. And then if I press Control Shift or Command Shift, I can deselect. And the same, what we can also do, which is especially useful for pre-flop, we can use Option to just select all the suited cards of the same value, and Option Shift to deselect those. Okay, so you have some hotkeys for faster manipulations, but when you're working post-flop, what's really useful are these categories. So for example, let's say I want to be really aggressive with my straights, so I can just press the plus and it will add to the selection. Trips as well, and 2 pair, let's say I just always want to raise with those, bet with those, so I just select them all, apply brush, and the selection will disappear and the brush will be applied to those. Now you can also just combine these things. So let's say I want my better 1 pairs, but I don't want to select the ones with flush draws, or backdoor flush draws. And then you can just mix and match. You have the minus and the plus, and you can build some selections this way and apply different brushes. So this is how you can build different ranges in Hold'em Trainer. And you can go as simple as you want, right? We have quite some simple ranges here in the beginning, and you can go pretty much as complicated as you like. I wouldn't recommend going too complicated, because the purpose is to get some rhythm in your game, but you can really do what you like. And it goes for any spot that is possible to get to in poker, you can do that. So let's see how the training works. So something I'm actually not that good at is knowing when I should call with in the big blind when somebody raises me. So maybe we can practice one of these ranges. You can see fold is all the blue, right? and call are like most pairs, lower pairs. These higher cards that are not suited should be calling. These lower suited cards should be calling, most of them. Then what we have, well, let's actually dive into it. What we have here is, so aces, kings, queens, and ace king pretty much always raise to 10 big blinds. And also king, queen suited. And then these Broadway suited hands, as well as jacks and tens, and the suited connectors, and some of these suited aces, they should just raise about, I think the brush here is half the time. Yes, half the time. So that's quite a good balanced raising range. And so let's try to practice that. So we can either from the manager or directly from the editor, we can press here, and it will take us to the trainer. So this is the second element of Hold'em Trainer. The first thing is you can build your strategies however you like, and the second is you can train them. So here, let's look at the situation, right? What happened is the first player sitting to the left of us raised, everyone folded, and we're in the big blind, and now we need to decide what to do. You can also use these arrows here to go back through the history. You can go back to the start, see, okay, we have a raise, fold, 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 and now it's up to us, right? And here we have the actions that occur in our brush, in our options, basically, that we determined. And what we have here is a random number that's being generated. So this is a random number between 0 and 100. And this will help us decide what to do in this case when we have a mixed strategy with a certain combo. So when I said before, some of the time we want to raise, some of the time we want to call with certain hands, then this number will help us decide. So in a 50-50 split, let's say we raise 50% of the time and call 50% of the time with a certain hand, then if this number is above 50, we can raise. And if it's below 50, we should call. We should always take the lower number to the more passive action and the higher numbers to the more aggressive action. And so on it goes when you have 3 different options and whatnot. You will figure it out. So 9-6 I think is definitely a fold, but 9-7 as well. So we'll just keep going here. Now I remember the suited connectors I think were sometimes raise, sometimes call. And because this is above 50, I think this time it's a raise, right? So you can keep going. On the top here you have some accuracy stats. For now we're perfect, 5 out of 20. That's the session length. So another fold, fold. Probably 3s. Again, I think the pairs were, like the lower pairs were calls. I think always calls in the big blinds. King 4 suited, I'm not sure, I would fold it. So it's wrong here. I'm actually not getting the feedback that it's wrong. I should be getting feedback. I'll try to fix that. So it was a call. Anyway, it didn't proceed. So we have another fold. Fold here is wrong. That was a call. And so on. And you can keep doing this until the session is over, or you can just end the session. And you'll get some feedback, some stats. And there's also a section where you can see your overall stats and training history and so on. But that's basically it. So you have the trainer, and right, when you click directly on the trainer, you can select multiple ranges to train at once. And you can also choose how many combos you want to train, and you can just go. And there's some settings. So the one setting that's kind of interesting is that sometimes when you build ranges, if you recall, like when we were building ranges, whenever you apply a new brush, the selection disappears. So if you don't like that, you can actually keep selection here and some other settings. But yeah, that's basically it. And so not everything is perfect yet. There's still some bugs, some incomplete things, but it's working for the most part, the things I showed you. And what I'll be doing in the near future is I'll be uploading new videos, mostly covering the sample ranges that you can see here. So some of the preflop ranges. And I'll just be explaining the strategic reasons for why these have been built this way, and talk about some strategic concepts, and just help you get started to make your game better, right? To refine your game. That's the idea. And so the way that we can work with this is they will be available in what I call a Hold'em Academy. So if you go to Academy, this is not on the live page yet, but there will be some articles. And in these articles, I'll feature the ranges. And then what you can do is you can duplicate them. So for example, if I want to duplicate this range, I just press here, been added to your repertoire. So if we go to my ranges, now I have a folder called Academy, and the range is right here. So all these ranges that you see here, I'll make videos about them, I'll make an article about them, and you'll be able to duplicate them into your repertoire, and you can start training them. And I'll also be creating some community accounts on X and Discord, so feel free to join those once they're available. Should be soon. And yeah, stay tuned for future videos. Thanks so much.